Welcome to Sunrise Life, the podcast where we have deep conversations, but this time the conversation is with a photographer. By popular demand, I've had lots of fellow photographers who listen to this podcast ask, when are you going to interview a photographer, Christy? So today I have Tim Bennett on the line. Say hello.
Hey, Christy, how you doing? Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I would like to say that when I shot with Tim, it was when I went to Texas. That was earlier this year, I think, right? Was that like January,
Yeah.
February?
Yes, it was, I think it was February or something, somewhere around in there, yeah.
Yeah. I remember, Tim, you had messaged me and you were like, oh, I really like your work and I want to shoot, but I'm kind of creatively burned out at the moment and maybe next time. And I was like, all right, yeah, no worries. And then I posted one of my infamous, ridiculous comedy skits, and you were like, wow, that is so hilarious. Like, I have to come up with a reason to shoot you now. And I was like, interestingly, before I posted that, every time I post one of those, I'm like, oh my God, like, people are going to hate me for posting this, but literally 99% of people think they're funny. And it's 1% of people that get all butthurt in the comments where I'm like, it's supposed to be funny. It's not about you,
No, I love those skits. I think you just posted one recently, which was hilarious, on the rocks or something like that. But yeah, that was,
Thank you. Yeah. And I understand why people get like annoyed by them because maybe they see a little bit of themselves, but it's not supposed to be like, I think people take it too seriously than it's intended to be.
absolutely, absolutely. You got to have fun doing this stuff, man. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So I've always appreciated you because that was like kind of how we started off on that foot, and then we had a great shoot and we've kind of been in touch randomly on and off ever since then.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I really wasn't familiar with your podcast until after we shot. And then you're right. We had an amazing shoot, real creative. You had your hair done in that really cool way from another shoot, but it wasn't until afterwards I became familiar with your podcast and got really plugged into appreciating your advocacy for the traveling model world. But we know a lot of the same people. I mean, Veronica Lavery and Azura Grace and Jamie Byrne, and you introduced me to two because of your podcast that I would have never met before, and that's Poppy Seed Dancer.
Yeah.
I got to meet her and shoot with her, and then Autumn Hughes because of your podcast. I actually hosted her last month. And we got to meet and became friends and did some amazing work. She's an amazing model and makeup artist too. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Autumn is super talented. I mean, so is Poppy. I mean, so is like everybody's got their like really special talents. That's what makes it so interesting to get to know them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you never know, right? What's cool about this community is, like you said, you and I we never met before, and we got together to shop for a couple hours, and then that's, sprang into this relationship that you and I have, even though it's, thousands of miles away, and we become, fans of each other, and it's just nice to see things like that happen in this community. Good things can happen. It's not all bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the record, for anybody out there that, is concerned about like the photography industry and it being supposedly full of creeps or whatever. We talk about creeps because we don't want each other to run into creepy situations, but 95% of my shoots are non-creepy, like it's mostly all good. It's just the few that you got to look out for, and we're trying to raise awareness about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Tim, I've got some questions from other people that answered my Instagram survey. Questions to ask the photographer that's going to be interviewed today that I would like to ask you. Let's see. Which one do I want to ask you first? All right. What photographers or artists have inspired you?
Oh, that's easy for me. And this is going to probably go back before most people. I've been doing this for 25, 30 years. Dave Hill, who was a very, very famous photographer. He's out of Nashville, Tennessee, became this really cool creative photographer in LA. It was definitely one. Robert Alvarado was another one. Big fan of Robert's work. And then Michael Rosen, who has since passed away, was a famous Chicago photographer. Just his work is way ahead of his time. But those three for sure were a big influence on work in the beginning, and they still do influence me. So Michael Rosen, Dave Hill, and Robert Alvarado.
Yeah, I've worked with Robert Alvarado. He's cool.
Yeah, and Veronica just shot with him recently again. She's out in LA now. They just finally got together again after a long time.
Yeah, he's one of the few photographers that I would shoot with again in LA area. Like, I don't know. I didn't really have good success the times that I went through there, but it's been like almost 10 years since I was there, so maybe it's.
Right.
What is your favorite kind of shoot?
Ooh, I don't think there's a genre that I really, or it more comes down to the chemistry between, the model and the photographer, and if there's a chemistry, obviously my history is I used to have a professional commercial boudoir business, and I did private clients for boudoir. So I did a lot of boudoir and plaid and stuff like that. But to me, it could be a fashion shoot as long as the chemistry is great. It could be an editorial shoot if the chemistry is great. It's more about feeling to me than a particular genre. I do quite a bit. I used to do product photography back in the day. I've done pinup stuff like that. So it really just comes down to the relationship during that shoot and how it feels and the creativity, because we all know that comes out in the final product.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed that in your page. There's a lot of, I think, I would say like fantasy, fashion, boudoir, steampunk elements when I look at your photos. So yeah, it's kind of just like various things you seem to be inspired by at the moment.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, after I started shooting again, I just kind of just felt free to try whatever inspired me at the moment.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. And here's kind of a little bit more of an edgy question. What would
Yeah.
make you decide to not work with a model again?
Well, kind of back to what I said earlier. If there's no real artistic connection or flow, if you will, whatever word you want to use, I probably wouldn't, reach out and try to shoot with them again. It happens rarely, but that's probably the only reason I wouldn't, unless there's something weird that happened. And I know we're going to get to that point down the road when you're going to ask me some of the weirdest things that happened. I'll tell you at that point about one of them, but absence of the creative connection, probably.
Yeah. So would you say that like being conversational or being willing to like go with the flow on ideas would be something that would be a good connection during a shoot or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, you and I work together, right? I had a couple concepts, but your input was just as important. And we kind of flowed with it and did this and moved there. And, people have done this for a long time, understand you may have a concept going into the shoot, but most of the time it ends up moving away from the original concept
Yeah.
to something even better than you thought it was going to be at the beginning. So those kind of communications, it's a team effort, right? I mean, to me, you're an artist, I'm an artist. That's the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can only like see a shoot experience from my own lens as I have worked with photographers. And when I talk to another photographer and I hear them describe a situation where the model was not willing to go with the flow or was not willing to, do their idea in the moment, then, I have to imagine what that situation is like because for myself, I'm always just like, as long as I guess obviously there's things that need to be in place in advance, like communication. What are we going to shoot? How much nudity is there going to be? How many hours is it going to take? Because if I get there and there's 5 minutes left and somebody's like, all right, do you want to get honey dumped on you or get a suspension bond going on? Then that'll throw me off. I can't always go with the flow, but within certain parameters, you know what I mean?
There's definitely got to be boundaries, and it goes both ways. And now I'm glad you mentioned that, 'cause that's one story I'll have to tell you when we get to that horror part of this thing. You just
I feel
reminded me of
like we
something.
should get it out of the way now because we keep on indicating.
Okay.
All right, so
Okay. Without
without
no name, yeah, no names mentioned. Okay. So I did shoot this when I first started reshooting again. I took a break for about 8 years. I was rebuilding my portfolio, and there was one model I worked with. And we did fine. It was great. And it was a great shoot or whatever and fine. And then I don't know, a week or so later, she hit me up again. Hey, I'd like to shoot. I said, cool, whatever. What do you want to do? Oh, I want to shoot content for my Patreon. I'm like, okay, I guess that's fine, whatever. And I said, exactly what do you want me to shoot? And I don't know if I can use this word on the podcast because I want you to shoot my private parts.
Okay.
Like, yeah, and I'm going like, well, first of all, I can't use that content. I don't really shoot that anyway. I mean, I, I'm sure there are plenty of other photographers out there that would love to do that, but for me, it's not anything I really want to do. And she got pissed off and just got mad at me. And I said, sorry. So, I mean, boundaries go both ways. I mean, that's my boundary. I mean, have I shot it before? Yeah, years ago when I was shooting for Playboy and all that kind of stuff, but it was never like hustler stuff, whatever. I mean, not, and I'm not judging. If people do that, great. But me, my thing, I want to be able to use the work. I want to be able to put it on social media and I want to do those kinds of things as well. But instead, as opposed to me doing all the editing and all the shooting and all the lighting and just to shoot her close up of her private part,
Yeah.
like, no, I don't want to do that. So yeah, it kind of goes both ways, I guess, boundary wise.
Yeah, that's interesting. So she liked your photography style and she wanted explicit images in that style?
Well, she liked the style, but it wasn't even about that. She just really wanted me to shoot close-ups of her private part. Well, there are plenty of people out there who would love to do that. It's just not my thing. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, and I have experience with this for collaborations with Patreon with other photographers in the past as well. And this is part of the reason why I ended up just shooting self-portraits, because asking somebody else to take your explicit images for you is, it's like a loaded gun, it could come up with different ways to like affect the creative process or bite you in the ass down the road. Like if that person, ends up selling your photos behind your back because they have the copyright for them. I'm not saying that you would do that, but like this has happened to me in the past.
no, you're exactly right. You're not the only one. There's several models that I know that have been down that road and, we're shooting content or whatever. And the next thing you know, guys sold the images or the videos or whatever and they have no control over it. So, and good friends of, we both know, I'm not going to mention their names, what's happened to them.
Yeah. Totally. And then there have been times where a photographer who I really like their work has wanted to shoot with me. And I used to do a lot more trade collaborations for like Patreon content. And before Patreon, there was a site called Zivity. Did you ever use Zivity?
No.
Yeah, Zivity was like the pre-Patreon platform where photographers and models could make a profile and they would tag each other when they had a photo set uploaded, and then fans would like send prizes. Like they would come up with a prize, like I want you to do a sexy Santa photo shoot, and whoever's my favorite photo set is going to get $250. So there's
Oh, cool.
always these ongoing contests that were
Yeah.
funded by the fans on the website. So you could either be a
Right.
fan, a photographer, or a model on there. So it was really cool, but
Okay, cool.
it was so cool. But when Patreon came out, Patreon's was a lot more user friendly for fans and for everybody. And it was a lot easier to like make more money because instead of having to win a contest, you could just have a monthly subscription. So you would have more.
Right.
But anyway, so I used to do content collaborations for Zivity, and then it turned into Patreon. And, oftentimes I would ask the photographer, is it okay if I can get some like erotic images for my higher tier patron
Hmm.
subscribers? Because people at a higher tier would get more explicit stuff. And I could use
Right.
this photo set in more different ways if it included explicit. But not every photographer was comfortable shooting that, or I might not necessarily be willing to pose that way for every photographer. So that made it kind of weird sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I get it. And let me make it clear. Obviously, I'm not opposed to shooting nude. I mean, I shot you nude. We, put you in Venus magazine, blah, blah, blah. It's just that it was just a weird thing to be asked. So that's all she wanted. It was just,
Yeah.
like all she wanted was a close up of her, private parts. Like that's just weird for me. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see it being if there's like a photo series that starts out clothed and ends nude.
Yeah, right.
The last shot be like an ass shot kind of makes sense. But
Right.
then if you have to
Absolutely.
edit it, then.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. And your editing process, it seems like you do put a lot of care into your post processing.
Well, I do because I mean, my history is before I was ever a photographer, I was a retoucher and a digital artist. And I learned from Natalia Taffarel, who's a famous retoucher down in South America, back when people were doing pixel level editing. And so I've been doing Photoshop since Photoshop 1 came out and take a lot of pride in my post production. So yeah, I do put a lot of time into post and doing, without trying to make it look plastic. And that's always the hard part, right? You got to find that fine line between realistic editing and then now it looks completely plastic. So we were taught back then, we were taught back then as a retoucher, you don't want somebody to look at that and go, oh, it's been retouched, right? So yeah, I took a lot of pride in my retouch for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where we're at today because it's getting hard to tell what's real and what's not real.
Oh, for sure. And AI is becoming a big thing as we all know. And, some of it's good, some of it's not good. Some of it saves a lot of time. Some of it's obviously plastic. I have feelings both ways. If it's a tool that's going to help me save time and it looks okay, great. But the old fashioned way to me is still the best way.
Yeah. The topic of AI comes up every once in a while on the podcast. And there's some people that are like extremely against anything AI at all ever. And then there's some people who are like, yeah, do all my shortcuts for me. Like, where do you stand on that?
Well, two different areas of AI. One, AI imaging, which I'm a huge fan of. And I know it's not very popular right now because as you know, I have done a lot of AI imaging, but it's not just plug in, put the text thing in there. I also use my own photography, my own photographs, incorporate that in composite work and move some things around and several different apps I use. I like to play with it. To me, it's another artistic outlet. So you got the imaging part there, but the AI engines you're talking about, I think, like have been introduced into Photoshop and some other platforms out there. Again, I have mixed feelings. If it's something that's going to save me time and it looks realistic, I'm okay with it. But I'm not okay with somebody just hitting a button and taking an image and boom, there you go. As far as a photograph per se, you
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I was telling you at the beginning of the podcast, like in Adobe Premiere Pro, there's a feature that can take all the ums out of my podcast episodes. So with one click, it scans the whole thing, transcribes it, and then it'll take out all the ums and I can cut out all the pauses. And it has made it so that it's so much easier for me to keep this podcast going because like it only takes me 10% of the time to do the editing. And I think that that's super helpful.
absolutely. And I totally agree with you. That's things like that. Give us more of that. Give us more of that. Whatever you can give us to make it more efficient without removing the artistic part of it. Right. So, and yes, we definitely want you to keep on doing the podcast, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I enjoy the process of doing it. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a fan of the AI like images that you have shared. I think you shared one recently where it was like a lot of white in the photo. Like, oh my gosh. It was that? I need to go back on your page and check it out.
I don't know. I did one recently. I did an AI image of Jamie Byrne because she wanted to be a character called Witchblade, which I wasn't familiar with. And I did some research. I hosted her this month for 10 days. So we were together for 10 days and she goes, hey, can you make me a character called Witchblade? And I did the research. I looked at it. I pulled it up and I went to Midjourney. I did some other things. I took pictures of her. We kind of integrated the whole thing. So I recently posted that one, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago. So it's a fairly recent AI composite kind of thing that I've done. I did a lot of AI work for Veronica Lavery because she loves it. She actually has prints in her house now of some of the stuff I did with her. Yeah, and I know it's very controversial, but I mean, 99% of my work is photography, and just playing with AI every now and then. Who cares? I'm not identified as AI. I'm not saying it's my work or whatever. And I know people get butthurt and it's controversial, but to me, it's an artistic outlet.
Yeah, yeah. As long as you're not completely substituting all of your skill for like AI, then.
Totally.
But I
Totally.
guess the ethical debate is, that AI was training itself on like actual artists without their consent, which is definitely an ethical thing for sure.
So that is true. That is definitely something to to think about and debate, and I'm sure we will for the next few years.
Yeah. So you touched on it briefly. You touched on your work with Playboy, and I think that that is worth kind of diving into. You mentioned that you've been shooting for 25 years, and I should have asked you this at the very beginning of the podcast, but I'm kind of all over the place today. So can you give like a synopsis of your photography since you started and like how your career has progressed to lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the Cliff Note version. Like I said, I started with film way back in the day. I had my own dark room, would develop my film and pictures and stuff like that when I first started dabbling with it. At the time, like I said, I was primarily a retoucher and digital artist. Then I got into product photography, which made me a lot of money back in the day, believe it or not. I've been published in more magazines with my product photography than anything else, ironically. But and then that kind of led me to starting shooting people. And then I got my first studio back in 2008. I think it was 2008.
Wow.
5,000 square foot studio. And I had a manager and a complete staff, assistants and stuff like that. Well, that's when I was doing my commercial work and also my private boudoir for clients to, produce boudoir books for their husbands or fiancés or boyfriends or whatever. And that was a very successful business for 4 years until 2012. 2012, I got married to my second wife, and then we moved to Florida, and I stopped shooting in 2012 and didn't start back until 2021.
Oh man.
So I've only been back shooting in 2021. And boy, I got to tell you, the world changes in that amount of time because prior to that, as you know, Model Mayhem was the world, right? We could go there and find our connections and our models and photographers and makeup artists. I come back in 2021, Model Mayhem was pretty much, dormant, and Instagram was the whole game. I didn't even have an Instagram account until mid 2021 and then started rebuilding my portfolio. So that's kind of the quick background. But yeah, I mean, I used to shoot for Sky Vodka, Jägermeister North America, Dean Guitar Company, a lot of latex brands, stuff like that. Maxim magazine when it was still a real magazine, couple promotions for Playboy, but that was way back in the early 2000s. So it's kind of
Wow.
my quick history.
So you said that you had your own dark room and you were doing film. Was that for like a school?
I love you, Chrissy. I'm not that young. No, I was, I was married and had 3 kids. It was just, it was a hobby for me at the time to do it and play around with the dark room and the film and stuff like that. But no, I love you. I'm not that young though.
I don't know. You said 25 years, and if you were like in college, you'd be like 20. So that's great. It started out as a hobby, and you ended up getting into a lot of like mainstream publications after starting it as a hobby. Like, I'm sure a lot of photographers that are listening want that. Like, can you describe like how that came to fruition?
Wow. I thought about that before. How did I, become that successful, if you will? And honestly, I tell people I just fucked up more than everybody else. It was a passion. Number one, you got to be passionate about it. Take the failures as successes, shoot more than everybody else, learn from as many people as you can. And the only thing honestly, the answer I can give you is just the passion drove me there. It was just, I always wanted to be better. And the ironic thing back then that we didn't have today, we didn't have social media back then. So to me, one of the downsides in social media world we live in now, we tend to compare ourselves a lot more than I used to, because all in your face every day. And then we get distracted from our own kind of genre, our own way to do things. And I try to keep that in mind even today, but that wasn't a problem back then. I mean, there was not a lot of places that you could go see other work other than like Model Mayhem and places like that. So I just said the drive was a passion more than anything else, and things just started falling in place. There was no magic. I didn't know a special person here or there. And my favorite 6 words for photography from my work is 6 words. Let the work speak for itself. And I still believe that to this day. Speak through your work. Let the work speak for itself. My favorite 6 words.
I love that. Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I do believe that if you are really passionate and you stick to your guns, and you're genuine in what you're doing, then, the traction will come. But you're probably right about how a lot of people are comparing their work to other people's work. And I feel like I see it a lot. I see a lot of photographers that want to shoot like glamour style photos, a lot of their photos kind of blend in with each other. A lot of people that want to shoot artistic nudes in nature, a lot of their photos are like similar poses, similar compositions, you know what I mean? And so I'm always like, I mean, I shoot self-portrait, and my own work often tends to kind of blur around with everybody else's work that's in a similar, you know, location or whatever. So I'm always like trying to be like, what can I do to make it more interesting? What can I do to make my photos say something besides just this is a
Oh yeah, for sure. I think taking chances and try something new, right? I mean, a good example when you and I shot, if you remember that one set we did, I had the whole low-lying fog machine going on with the red lights behind there and all this. I said, I told you, Christy, I don't know if this is going to work out or not, but we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. And after the whole house was smoked up, we got some good images, but it's something I never tried before. It's like, what the hell? Give it a shot. If it sucks, it sucks. If it's good, it's good.
Yeah, I remember I think you had to change your shutter speed quite a bit because your continuous lights were not nearly as bright as like the lowest setting on your strobes or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, if you remember, we had the continuous lights in the back, the red lights in the back, the tubes, and then I was using the strobe, I think a beauty dish for you, and then I had to kind of balance between the ambient light and the strobe, and we eventually got it, but you've got to play around with all those little things or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love experimentation. I feel like if I'm just like a notch in a photographer's camera and they're just doing the same thing with me that they've done with 25 other models, I'm just like, all right, like let's get through this. But I do enjoy when somebody, you know, knows their gear, but they want to try something different. I like that.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to, continually, it's easy to get in your comfort zone and do the same thing over and over again. I'm as guilty as anybody else, and that's when things get stale and we're like, well, I'm not very excited right now. We'll try something new. You know what I mean? Go for it.
All right, I got some more questions. This question comes from a photographer that I've worked with, and he's asking how much detail in your initial contact with a model to set up a shoot is the right amount of detail.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it depends on who it is. I mean, everybody's different. Everybody's a different individual. And the perfect example I can give you is Azura Grace. We both know her, right?
Yeah.
She's an amazing model and she's autistic. And I've learned, and she has told me this, she has educated me on autism. I have to be very specific if we're going to do a shoot, exactly what I want, wardrobe I want, where we're going to shoot, when we're going to shoot. Because if I change it, it kind of freaks her out a little bit. She'll be the first to admit it. So she's educated me very well how to communicate with her. We've become very good friends, so we shot so many times after that. But I remember the first time we shot, I changed something the day before, and she didn't like that. So, but then there are other people, and other models maybe I worked with a lot of times or whatever that go with the flow. I mean, if the question is like the initial first time you're going to shoot with somebody, I would say be as detailed as possible. Hey, I want to do this kind of concept. I'm thinking this kind of, and have some shots to show them, some inspo shots to give them. That always helps a lot. Give them a visual idea. If you can send some inspo shots, that helps a lot. Right now, you're kind of on the same page. But then after that, let it go with the flow, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a very controlling photographer, as you know. I don't sit there and tell you put your hand on your head or turn your out, whatever. I'm more of a flow photographer. Let the model flow and capture the image.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. And I would say when it comes down to, you know, last minute changes, the only thing for me that would be a red flag if I was working with somebody for the first time is if they were going to change the location right before the shoot. Because what if like I, you know, told my friend that, hey, I'm going to be at XYZ location and suddenly we're going to the woods in the middle of nowhere instead.
Oh,
That'd be a red
yeah,
flag.
I totally agree. That's not cool at all. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I understand like shit happens or whatever. And shit has happened with me where the location had to get changed last minute and I had to be like, all right, is this person potentially a serial killer or is this,
Exactly. Right.
yeah. And there's another person that was asking about the best way to message somebody about setting up a shoot. So when you're going to work with somebody for the first time, like how does that usually come to fruition? Do you usually contact them or they contact you? And how does that get going?
It goes both ways. I mean, I get hit up quite a bit lately because now I've got a fairly decent following on Instagram. I mean, I've gone from 0 to 25,000 in 2.5 years, and I'm astonished that it's grown that fast. But I've got some visibility now, so I get hit up as well. But if I, it's typically everything's through Instagram right now. I mean, I don't do, I've been on Model Mania since 2008, but I rarely go on there anymore because to me it's so archaic. It's hard to use. And so all my contacts now are through Instagram. I'll just, initial hit up, hey, this is who I am and I like your look. And I try to send a concept. Hey, I think you'd be great for this concept and just start a conversation there. And that's kind of how it's happened since I've been back shooting.
That's cool. And you said you've been back since 2021.
Yes.
Cool. And so would you say a lot of your work comes from Instagram these days?
Most all of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's the main platform.
Prior to that, you said you stopped shooting when you got married again in 2012?
2012. Yeah.
2012 to 2020. A lot has changed since then.
And that's when it was that was a weird story because I married a model and she got jealous of me shooting, but I won't go into detail of that. So I kind of quit for that reason. And biggest mistake I ever made because that was my artistic outlet. And I'm so excited to be back shooting again. It breathes life into me for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting hearing about that happening from a photographer's point of view because I hear it happening to models all the time too. Like the model falls in love with somebody and then their significant other tells them they can't model anymore or whatever. Like I guess relationships can be weird for some people.
Yeah. That's an understatement.
Yeah, I mean, I had an ex who he said he was cool with my modeling, but then he would get really passive aggressive about like the various aspects of my modeling. You know.
That's what happened to me too. Passive aggressive behavior and to the point I didn't want to do it. So
Yeah,
anyway.
that sucks. But yeah, that's a long period of time. 2012 was like really before everybody was on Facebook. Like I wasn't on. I think I had a Facebook in 2012, but I didn't really start using it until 2013 or 2014. So yeah, the whole world changed in that span of time.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, getting back into it, I had to repurchase equipment and stuff and figure out how to get seen and all that stuff. But yeah, it was a huge change those few years in this whole industry.
So another person has asked a question, and this is a fellow model, and she asks, when a model is contacting you to set up a shoot, does it throw you off if the model has their own contract or like policy webpage for you to review before shooting?
Honestly, Christy, I've never had that happen to me. I've never had anybody present their, you know, whatever policy thing, I mean, obviously there's some models that present, hey, I'll do this, and this, and I don't do this, and this. That's fine. These are boundaries or whatever, but I've never had an issue with that whatsoever. I mean, it wouldn't bother me unless it was weird. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are other traveling models who have like a booking form on their webpage and it'll have like some things where you say like, if there's going to be liquid at the shoot, you have to book like at least this amount of time, like, getting covered in honey or something like that. Things like that.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that makes sense, but I haven't dealt with that. It does make sense. It's smart for sure.
Yeah, or their like cancellation policy and all that good stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. What are the attributes of a model that you find are the most important and attributes that are the least important?
The most important, I'm a personality guy, believe it or not, even though I shoot, mostly nude females a lot, but personality to me is everything. And there's a very good example of somebody that I worked with. Her name is Whitley Queen. She's a local model. I didn't work with her for a long time. She's extremely tattooed, blue hair, and turned out to be one of the best things I did to shoot with her. She's an amazing model and her personality is just so easy to work with. And so to me, personality is everything. If you don't have the personality, it's difficult to have a good image, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah,
it goes back to that creative relationship or whatever. That personality is so important to me.
yeah. And I do think that, especially in freelance modeling, where we're not just like, working for some ad agency, showing up and getting our picture taken and then leaving and getting a check later. Like, this freelance industry is built on connections. And if you had like a not positive, not energetic experience at a shoot, then that, with photographers, you're probably getting hit up all the time by models who are coming through your area. And if 5 different models email you or message you on Instagram and they say they want to shoot and you only have the time or whatever for one of them, then you're probably going to pick the
Mhm.
one that you had a good time shooting with last time, not the one that wouldn't speak at all or whatever. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a people industry, right? Right. And it just makes it more fun and more creative. And you're exactly right. Just because you might be a, you know, 11 out of 10 great looking, beautiful model, but if you're no fun to work with, I'm not going to work with you. I'm just not going to do it. It's not worth my time and it won't be fun. It won't be, the energy's not going to be there. If the energy's not going to be there, the end picture's going to stop, in my opinion. But yeah, personality is everything to me.
Yeah. And on that note, like I have perspective on this as well. And because when I first got into this, like, I first started modeling when I was 18, but I was like, I felt like I was pretty, but I didn't think that I was pretty enough to model. And I certainly knew that I wasn't tall enough to model for like mainstream whatever, because I'm 5'2". But like over the course of time, I have learned that being on time and not being hungover and being reliable and consistent is more important in freelance modeling than being pretty. Do you agree with that?
I do to a certain extent, absolutely. I've been so fortunate, which kind of gets me to, why I started shooting with professional models because I never did before. I always said it was easy to find, had a great group of models that worked with me, whatever, whatever. But I knew when I restarted, it was the most efficient way to rebuild my portfolio is to work with professional models because they're on time. They know what they're doing. They know how to pose. They're fun to work with, etc. So, yeah, back to what you're saying. Yeah, being on time or even early is great. Just do what you say you're going to do, and it's huge. It's absolutely huge. It makes up for a lot of other things.
We try to be drama free and not bring managers slash boyfriends.
Right.
Have you had any experience with managers slash boyfriends?
I'm glad you brought that up. It was one of my stories and my horror stories. I had a TF shoot. This girl hit me up to shoot, which is fine. She was, a cute girl, and we had some concepts and stuff like that. And she's like, "Hey, I'm going to bring my husband." I said, "Cool, that's fine with me. I don't care, whatever." And the weird part was, so they show up, everything is cool. He was actually shooting some behind the scene video for me, whatever. I gave him my other camera. But then when I started actually shooting her, he was back there with his camera, like 2 feet away from me, shooting at the same time, like in my space. You know what I mean? Like that was weird. That was like, what is going on here? Very strange situation. I'm shooting strobes, right? He's shooting, I don't know, he's not using my strobes, obviously. Like, what are you doing? Just in my space the whole time. So I have no problems with, companions or, whatever. Although I've heard a horror story, a friend of mine in Dallas, that he shot a model and she brought what's the word I'm looking for? Not a support animal, a friend, whatever, to come. And apparently, well, this friend stole a bunch of stuff from his studio.
Oh no.
Yeah, but I don't have any problem with husbands and stuff like that. Matter of fact, I can't even get Nick Azura Grace's husband to stay when he leaves. So I ask him, "Hey, you want to help me?" But I become friends with most of the husbands and boyfriends of the girls that I worked with over the years, but yeah, that's the only problem I've ever had is that one off thing.
Yeah, and he was shooting over your shoulder, which like kind of affects the whole shoot, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was just weird. It
Yeah.
was really weird.
Yeah. So he was trying to get photos of her like for his personal use or because he was also managing her and he was trying to get content at the same time.
I don't know. I would assume maybe it's a little both. But I don't know. It was just, I didn't ask him. It was just, let's get this shoot over with. I couldn't wait to get it done and over with. It was just weird. And because it was TF, there's really not a lot I could say, but it's one of those things. Let me know ahead of time if this is something you want to do,
Yeah.
and we could discuss it. And I would have said no, I really don't want to do that. You know what I mean? But when they show up and start doing it, it's a TF shoot. It's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't feel like, you have like if they're there for trade agreement. Yeah, I guess that's another reason why like hiring professionals like eliminates any of that weird stuff. Because if you're paying for a service and they're doing something like that, then you could be like, hey, cut that out.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another good topic talking about TF. It's really good for both involved to have their upfront expectations. This is what I expect, from the model standpoint, I expect this many images. From a, photographer standpoint, I expect this many looks or whatever. Have that ironed out before you even show up. Because I've heard the stories that models never get pictures back from TF and stuff like that, which I think is wrong. So try to get all that stuff ironed out before you show up for the creative process, and it makes it more relaxing, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. The more communication, the better. Kind of like what you were saying earlier when you were describing how you like to communicate with Azura. I think like the more details, even if it's in the very first email, I think as many details as possible, I'm happy with, because it just like accelerates the communication process to where, otherwise if you're having a 25 email back and forth to get everything figured out, then it gets down to the time where you're like, oh shit, he sent me the address. I think it was like 6 or 7 weeks ago. Where was that email?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So this is another question from somebody who, he actually sent me a bunch of questions. Many of them we sort of already answered. He asks, with the typical generation gap, like stereotypically between models and photographers and all of that societal judgment, has that affected you in other areas of your life?
As far as what I kind of misunderstood.
Yeah, the way that he typed out the question is kind of hard for me to like say it in a way that makes sense. Dealing with the typical generation gap between the model and photographer, I'm assuming he's, indicating that models are generally like, 20s and 30s and often older, and the societal judgment that comes with that. Has that affected you at all?
No, I mean, that's my ex-wife was 30 years younger than me. So I was, I mean, I was used to that. And obviously in this industry, you're going to be working with mostly 20 something, year old models. And I haven't seen it, or, 20, 30s, whatever. And I haven't had that problem with either communication or I don't know why people would judge me for that because that's the industry we live in, right? We shoot, women in that age, but it's just part of the game. It's part of the business that we're in. It's, yeah.
I suppose there are a lot of photographers out there who have some kind of like a mainstream job where their coworkers would be weirded out if they found out. And I've have like photographers that I've worked with get fired when their boss found their boudoir photography page and stuff like that. But nothing like that has ever affected you.
No, no. I mean, no. I'm proud of the work, and I've never had anybody, the only sometimes when I first started doing boudoir, my daughters would get a little weird about it. They're in their 20s now, but now they're like, hey, Dad, your work's great. I love it. It's cool, whatever. But I've never had any backlash from it. It's typically been positive feedback because I try to make it as classy as possible.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. And, I had issues with my dad at first too. But yeah, that was kind of weird. Basically, I don't know if I told you this, but my dad's very religious and very, very conservative. And when I told him that I was posing nude, he freaked out. He didn't freak out in that moment. It's kind of a loaded thing, but basically the only reason I told him was because I was in the process of making a documentary about freelance modeling. Nudity was in the movie, and it was a big deal to me at the time that like they knew that I was working on a film and that I had a filmmaker, and it took several years. Then I was like, well, if the movie comes out, my parents are going to want to see it, and if they see it, they're going to know that I pose nude. So I should tell them that I pose nude before it comes out. And if I'm going to tell them, I should film their response and make it a part of. So he didn't freak out on camera, but he freaked out the next day and emailed me and he told me he joined a support group for parents of children who are stuck in the sex slave industry. Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was hard to get that email from my dad, but over time and with consistency, I kind of started letting him see my Facebook posts again after the weirdness kind of died off. Took years, but
Right.
I'm still doing it. And that conversation was, damn, almost exactly 10 years ago. Holy shit. And he sees that I'm happy and I'm safe. And I think he sees the comments on Facebook when people are commenting on my photos. Usually they're like, wow, I love the lighting or what a beautiful location instead of like nice ass baby and stuff like that. So I think,
Beautiful. And back to what I said earlier, the 6 words that I love the most. Let the work speak for itself. And your work is fantastic, Christy. I mean, you're beautiful. Your posing is excellent. And so there you go. Let the 6 words speak for itself. And it seems like it's happening for you.
thank you. Yeah. So just a little bit of like friction initially with your daughters, but now they're cool with it and they love your work. So that's good.
Pretty much. Yeah, they're pretty much. There was one actually, my youngest daughter commented on a shot of, it was one that Poppy and I took in the park where she was doing this beautiful ballet pose, and my daughter commented on my Instagram, Dad, that's actually a beautiful shot. I'm like, oh God, that's fantastic. Okay.
That's nice. Yeah, it for me, if a photographer is hiding that what they're doing, or if they're always changing their photography name, or they're always on like a private account, you have to like request access, and they don't have a portfolio anywhere. That's when I'm like, why are you being so sneaky? To me, being sneaky and hiding
Right.
it is a red flag.
That's a huge red flag. Absolutely. And ironically, even some that have been doing it a long time, who I'm talking about, can still have that weird stuff going on. We know there are a couple in this industry that are famous and they seem to have this great exterior, fantastic work. And you hear the stories about all the predatory stuff they're doing. So you can't always tell either way, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, somebody could be very well known and still have ulterior motives.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I have another question that I also ask everybody on the podcast. I call it the Rising Phoenix era of your life. Can you describe a situation where you were faced with some kind of a challenge that you had to overcome?
Absolutely. The first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about this was my restart as a photographer in 2021. I literally didn't even have a camera. I didn't have a camera. I didn't have lights. I had nothing but my freedom from my recent divorce, and which entailed, of course, huge investment of equipment and time and energy and restarting from nothing because my portfolio was still based back in 2012, to rebuild the portfolio. It was a huge undertaking, but, here I am, 3 years later, finally with a portfolio. I've got the equipment that I love. I've made some fantastic friends in this industry, but without a doubt, that would be my rising Phoenix story, restarting my photography for sure.
Yeah, that is really cool, honestly. Like, I couldn't imagine, like, having to, just kind of keep it off for that long, not even having a camera. Like, that's intense. Like it was over for you for like almost 10 years. Like, that's intense.
Yeah, it was. I mean, even getting back when I started shooting, getting back into Photoshop, which I hadn't touched in 8 or 10 years, was like, relearning to walk again, but here we are now, and thank the Lord, and met amazing people like you and others. But that was definitely my Rising Phoenix story for sure.
Wow. And then you said you grew your Instagram to 25K in 2.5 years. Like, how did you do?
I don't know. I mean, I think just let the work speak for itself. I mean, shooting all the time, posting all the time, interacting. A couple things that helped me early on was I got to shoot with some pretty big, I don't call them influencers, but pretty big followers on Instagram, like Scarlett Begonias, who I shot early on. She's got 360,000 followers, and we hit it off really well. Got some amazing images, and she started posting my images on her Instagram. And that sent me a lot of people, gave me a lot of visibility. I mean, things like that helped quite a bit for sure.
Yeah. That's interesting because, like, I think that I actually had more followers in 2021 than I do now. Like the way that my following has happened over the years, I started my account in 2014 and it grew to like 60,000, I think, in the first 3 or 4 years. And it grew between like 2017 to like 2019. It went all the way to like 140. And then by 2021 or 2022, it got up to 163. And in the last 2 years, it plateaued and it's been slowly declining. And now I'm at 156. So I want to say it's probably because of the age of my account, and a large percentage of my followers are probably old accounts that don't log in anymore because I started that page in 2014. So that's,
Yeah, I don't know. I've looked and I've talked about this with other models that they get capped at around 128,000, just this weird number. It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. I could mention four or five right now. It's like, I don't know. I don't know why it stagnates like that. I have no idea why. That's like a magic kind of little area there for them, whatever. Instagram's an enigma. We know that, right? I mean,
yeah.
they'll flag you for random stuff, and I've learned a lot about Instagram. I did invest in the blue check mark, which helped me communicate with Meta. It's been worth it for me to be able to do that, to talk to them like, hey, what's going on here? But I'm learning more and more about Instagram every day. If you look at my Instagram account right now, a lot of my posts, I don't want to put this out on the air, maybe Instagram will get me in trouble, but a lot of my posts originate on Venus Magazine, which is my magazine, right?
Okay.
And then I'll collaborate with myself on my main Instagram, and it seems to keep me from getting flagged. It's working for me now, but I don't know if we post this podcast, Zuckerberg's going to hear about this and start flagging me for everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's worked for me. Anything that's kind of spicy or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
it seems to keep it from getting flagged.
Okay. Well, that's cool. I mean, I would say that like, as far as my own content, I am also kind of all over the place. You know, I post about the podcast, I post quotes. I don't even care what my like engagement is on any post anymore. I just kind of post what I feel at the time because I know that I don't think that my account can get out of whatever plateau that it's at. So I just kind of post whatever. But even though you're not shooting like only one genre of photography, like you've got, like I was saying earlier, like fashion, fantasy, pinup, and all these various styles, I would say that you're consistently posting bomb photos that have a vibe to them, even if it's not always the same niche. And that probably really helps your account like find new people to follow it.
Yeah, maybe. I think, first of all, I appreciate the compliment, but maybe that's what it is. It appeals to a lot of different people because I'm still exploring where I want to end up going. Eventually, I'm going to start a business again, start making money with this stuff. It took me 2.5 years to get here. So I'm trying to figure out where do I want to go to make myself happy, that I won't feel stagnant, shooting the same thing every day. It'll probably end up being, private boudoir again, which is fine. I made a lot of money. I mean, back in 2012, my average boudoir shoot was 2,000 a shoot. So if
Wow.
I could start doing that again, I'd be really happy with that. And I'm thinking about doing one-on-one workshops. I used to do that back in 2012, 2011, just one-on-one workshops. And I was charging $1,200 a day. And that included, pre-shoot, post-shoot, editing, retouching, and, providing a model, of course, and how to interact with a model, what you do, what you don't do. You don't touch them, blah, blah, blah. So those are the two things I'm kind of looking at starting to do again, try to make some money at this. But yeah, all over the place right now. It's just whatever. I'm like you. I'll post whatever I feel like posting. I
Yeah.
don't care. I really,
Yeah. No, that's good. You know, and as long as you're having a good time at it, then you're doing it right, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. What keeps you inspired for shooting?
Oh wow, that's hard. It's weird because I go ebbs and flows. I think we all do as artists. We go through ebbs and flows of I just don't feel inspired right now. I guess I've always believed concept first, right? Find a concept first and work backwards. You know what I mean? If that means, oh, that concept inspires me, working backwards. Okay, I'll find a model that fits that. I'll find the location. I'll find the lighting, whatever. And I'm bad about that. I'm trying to get better at it. When I feel uninspired, I'll try to find a concept. I'll look at inspo shots or whatever. And that tends to get me out of a rut. If I find something that challenges me as an inspo, and then I'll concept, and then I'll kind of work backward, and that tends to get me out of that little funk that I might be in at the time.
That's cool. Yeah, that's an interesting way to have the creative process, starting off with a concept.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't always do it, but that's my goal.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And I guess that kind of makes sense because the first time we were in communication, you were like, "Oh, I want to shoot. I just don't have a concept right now." And so I remember that like coming into play before we first shot. And then suddenly you were like, "All right, I have time. Let's shoot." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sweet." I had a free block of time as well, so it worked out.
It worked out great, and it was a fantastic day because I got to meet you finally, and here we are, how many months later? You know what I mean? So that's what I mean. It's so cool about this industry. It's not just about the creative process itself, but you will find people that you will connect with and become your creative family and that you're in touch with. And I mean, I probably talk to Veronica Lavery 2 or 3 times a week because we met as as shooters or as a creative team or whatever. And you and I have stayed in touch, and I can go down the list of people that I've met in this journey in the last 2.5 years. There's more to it than just creating art. This community is so amazing when you find the right people, and that's what's cool about it as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I have found that nowadays most of my friends that I communicate with are other photographers and models. I mean, I've got some other friends too that are not within the community, but I guess I've just been so much like so far into the forest that I can't see the trees for a very long time. Like this is a really, really niche, like professional traveling freelance model thing. It is so neat, but I mean, I'm so in it. Like, I don't know what I would do without it.
Well, I think we're the only people that understand what we do. I think a lot of people look from the outside in going, what in the hell are you doing? And you got to explain to them, they don't understand. Like, what do you mean you host models? Oh, like, you want to hear some credit. When I try to explain to people why, when I host models, they're like, oh, you got this hot chick staying at your house. Like, dude, it's not like that. I'm offering her, a safe, quiet place to do her work, and she goes and shoots and she comes back, and I leave her alone because they're on the email all the time, whatever. But the outside world goes, oh man, that's so cool. Like, no, you don't understand. But that's fine.
Oh man, that reminds me of a short story because I've been doing this for so long, and words like GWC or TFP or will you host me, to me that's like everyday verbiage. I remember I was like 2017 or something. I asked a photographer that I had already worked with like 3 times if he hosted models, and he was like unsure what I meant, and I was like, oh well, I'm going to be coming to your town. We've worked together before, so I'm comfortable with you. And if you have like a spare room at your place, like, do you host models? Do you let people crash at your place? And he was like, oh, I guess. Yeah, you could stay here. And then when I got there, he was like, the shoot went fine. But then after the shoot, when it was time for me to go to bed, he was like, oh, but you're going to be in my bed. And I was like, oh, what? And he was like, I thought you said you wanted to spend the night. And I'm like, I do. You said you had a spare bed. He's like, oh yeah, but it's just a mattress on the floor right now. There's not even sheets on it. And I was like, okay, well, do you have an extra blanket? Like, I'm not going to sleep in your bed. Like, what the fuck? And he got super pouty and super butthurt. And he wouldn't even share like his food in his fridge with me after that. I was like, okay, dude, I'm going to leave in the morning, I guess. I was going to stay there for a couple nights, but yeah, so I think that like expectations and whatever, like maybe I shouldn't have stayed with him. Maybe I thought we were cool, and then he was super fucking weird after that.
I don't know. I think that the moral to that story, this community is extremely small,
Yeah.
and you have to respect each other, and you have to take care of each other, because if you don't, the word's going to get out. Whether you're a model that's being a little, turd, or a photographer's being a perv or whatever, it's a small community. We know that, right? And you got to be, and that's one piece of advice I would give to every photographer that's listening. Watch your P's and Q's. Be careful what you say. Treat these girls with respect and honor, and everything's going to be fine. Don't go down the road of being this predatory dude that they're out there. because you'll be on somebody's list somewhere within a day. You know what I mean? So
I think that is good advice. However, like, I do have to say that the people that are hearing that are like actually listening to this podcast, are mostly the people that are worried about whether or not they're being perceived as creepy. And the ones that are actually creepy and doing creepy shit, they probably don't even listen to the show. They've got their heads so far stuck up their ass, they just think that there's some kick-ass photographer out there that, like, they don't care if they're making somebody uncomfortable, you
and
know.
we know exactly who you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, if you're listening and you're worried about that, don't worry about it. I mean, continuously work with more people. Your reputation will be built out there,
Yeah.
and it'll all work out.
Yeah. I wanted a message to all the photographers listening. If you are worried that a model might think that you're being creepy, just stop worrying about it, because the fact that you're worried about it means that you have empathy, and we're probably not talking about you. And that applies to all of the comedy skits that I make. Okay.
Which I love to do. I love them. Keep doing those.
Thank you. I will. And I will. One or two people are always going to get their undies in a wad on every comedy skit, but like, good art is supposed to make you feel something. For most of them, they
Amen.
laugh, and then a few of them, they get freaked out. But
You're doing something good then.
yeah, thanks. So, do you have any other, like, stories or any other pieces of advice that you wanted to share before we end the show?
No, I just want to, again, thank you, Christy, for everything you do for this community. I know the models that I've talked to, even the ones you have not interviewed yet, are that I always tell them, go find this podcast, listen. You've become such a great advocate for the traveling model community, and just keep doing what you're doing, because that's priceless. Like I said, I just had Jamie Byrne here last week, and we were talking about your ears were burning, I'm sure, and how she appreciates everything. But that's all I can say. And photographers, go listen to all these podcasts. You will learn something from every one of them.